So I know today that you started this morning at the Boys and Girls Club and saw and heard a little bit about where our monies go from Auction Napa Valley. The community has changed drastically over the years of growing up here until it is, and through today. So I was wondering if maybe Boots and John can talk a little bit about how the community has changed and how the vintners fit into it.
Well, you're probably referring to the wine auction in a way.
Auction and as you know, I think of the community changing as we didn't have any restaurants in Napa Valley. We had very few places that you could go. Now we have a plethora of fabulous places. The valley wasn't as philanthropic as it is now.
Well, no, not at all. But in '72, you people, Margrit, you know more about this than I do. You were here earlier, but there was the Grapevine Inn restaurant, now known as Bricks. There was a Mexican, the colonial restaurant that burned down. There was a Greek restaurant, the Abbey, up by Freemark Abbey. And there was Taylor's Refresher, the hamburger.
Was that already there?
Yeah, Taylor's.
Taylor's had been there since 48. Yeah. That was it. There were no restaurants. So people took cooking classes at Mondavi, other places, and entertained in their homes. That's what we did.
But maybe I because I was here in 1960, you know, there is a veterans home in Yountville, right? And by federal law, they cannot buy alcohol in a radius that is less than 1.5 miles. And Yountville was exactly 1.5 miles. And there were 20 bars in Yountville. They didn't serve wine. And they were made out of corrugated aluminum, cardboard, and there were 10 taxi cabs. Now in Napa, which at the time when I came had about 17,000 inhabitants, there was one taxi cab. So the taxi cabs brought those 2,200, you know, this was at the time when there were still a lot of veterans, down to Yountville, up and down, and up and down.
Now they have their electric wheelchair.
But then about 2 years later, they changed the law, you know, and so those bars disappeared. Yountville actually had suddenly a paved road. They never paved road when I first came. No. And I remember one time somebody in a little group, one was a real estate person, said, you know, there are those 3 crazy guys. There was Don Schmidt, and there was Caldwell, and the other was Del Monte. They bought that old Wurtzinger winery for $75,000. Now, what are they going to do with it? And one of them said, yes, they're going to put little shops in it. And the things, and who is going to go to Yountville? This was around 1970. Can you imagine the change? So there have been great changes.
Jim, we were talking earlier about how the Napa Valley vintners have changed drastically. I remember going with my father when I had pigtails, and there would be just, 6 or 7 people sitting around a table, and it was really the old eating and drinking group more than anything else, but it has changed.
What's wrong with that?
Wasn't anything wrong, it's still kind of sort of an old eating and drinking group.
Well, Bob Travers came up to me, I think it was in 1974, late 73, 74, said, hey, we have this group, I've just been in it about a year, and it's great. And these are the guys who are the Napa Valley. It was an old boys club, so I show up with Travers there, and Bob Mondavi is there, Maynard Amarine's there, all of these older guys are there. There's about 7 or 8 people. Now remember, I'm new to the Napa Valley. I'm a blue suede shoe lawyer from Los Angeles. I mean, give me a break. I thought, holy mackerel, this is. I got so excited that my hand was going like this. I couldn't keep the peas on my fork. I had to put the mashed potatoes on it. Just to be in the company of these guys, it was an old boys club. We met on Bale Lane in this old farmhouse, and we did that for years and years. And there was a guy named, what was his name? Scalia. And he proudly, he was not in the wine business per se, but he was always alluding to the fact that he had people who were very important and he was referring to the mafia, see, and so it was just this little guy. I think it was a bunch of BS personally, but in any event, here are these exciting people there. So that's how it started. Think of that as a little sapling. I mean, the old boys club, no women. There weren't for any for years. It went on like that. And Andre Telejeff then had his coterie of young ladies, about 5 or 6 of them, was it? Something like that. Marianne Roth was one of them. There were 6 of them, as I recall. That it was his chickens that he was bringing along to become winemakers, and he did a hell of a job. All of a sudden, that was from my experience, was the first time I saw women appearing on the wine scene, with certain notable exceptions. Forget about it. This was a real pioneer. But in any event, there weren't any women in the thing at all. Now the Napa Valley Vineyards is run by women. I mean, think about it.
Hallelujah.
It's a better thing. It's a much far better thing that we have now today. No question about it, because the enthusiasm that is being generated by the Napa Valley Vineyards, the women in it, and it didn't start out like that. I contributed to that somewhat, because when I was president of the Napa Valley Vineyards, it was 1986, and the board was there. There was John Trefethen, there was Jack Davies, there were all these names, the guys that I really admire. But I met with these guys in the preceding year. I said, we got to get younger people, and they said, well, yeah, soon. But when I got to be head wazoo, I said, I'm going to appoint my own board, which I did. And I got 4 young guys that, Paula, you can name the people we put on that board.
John Koensgaard,
yeah.
Myself, Jack Stewart.
Yeah, and also Reverdy Johnson.
And Reverdy,
yeah. So these are all younger people, and I thought, damn, we finally got a woman on this thing, because that's going to be the future. And this was the woman, Paula Cornell. And I've always one of the most. I'm very proud of having put her in where she could be where her dad and her mom were proud of her, and to grow as she has grown, and been a significant part of the Napa Valley all of her working years as an adult.
Well, thank you.
Can I come back to the philanthropy?
Yeah, please.
Because I didn't answer your question. I'm sorry, but today I think you've heard, and you were at the Boys and Girls Club, but in 1981 was our first wine auction, and it was decided that the beneficiaries of that auction would be our hospitals. It was all oriented to health. And the St. Helena Hospital here in St. Helena, and the Queen of the Valley and Napa were the beneficiaries. And then in succeeding years, that was broadened, and in 1999, it had been so successful. Today they've raised close to $100 million, 98 or $99 million over the years. It's been hugely successful, and far beyond anything that we ever thought we could do. And in the early years, the accent was really on everybody having a good time and so on. And we didn't pay a lot of attention nor promoted the idea to guess of where the money goes. But that has evolved over the years to the point where we now have, something like 40 to 45 beneficiaries, not only in health, but in housing and in youth development. You visited the Boys and Girls Club this morning, and there is a great orientation and accent to providing for our family. The Napa Valley has its reputation of being a very rich place, but let me tell you, just as in most communities, we have a very large population who are not very far above the poverty level. And our Clinical A, for example, which is an outpatient health clinic and dental clinic, 70% of those patients are Hispanic, and about 50% work in the wine industry, in the vineyards and so on.
What were some of the challenges when you were trying to get the idea of clinical A out there? What were the challenges that you stumbled across?
I got involved in '89. The clinic started in '72, and it was just a little one room putting Band-Aids on field workers. But it evolved. They went to Yountville on a trailer. In those early years, they had volunteer doctors that would come up. 2 doctors, Tuesday night, Thursday night. They had no fundraising, and then they moved down in '94 to Napa, and in 2002, with the help of the Vineyards and many generous people in the community, we built a health center. And today, and Clinical A was the anchor tenant, but now today Clinical A really occupies 95% of it. And they have 25,000 individual patients a year.
And you know, John,
very successful.
In 1981, when it was called the Napa Valley Wine Auction, by the way,
yes,
we made $140,000.
We made $140,000 the first year.
Yeah, it's also kind of a story.
That's pretty amazing. That
Changed a
what
bit.
it's changed.
Last year, $8.5 million. So it's the community benefits greatly. There are many nonprofits, and they rely on what we provide at the wine auction. So we're very proud of that.
Margrit,
Can I?
Oh yeah.
I just want to say one of the wonderful things about starting in the wine business here in the Napa Valley was the help that we got, and I think we all feel that way from each other. We started out with no winery, we had no equipment, we had nothing. And just to give you, for instance, during harvest time, we had no lugs, which where you put the grapes in when you pick. And so what did we do? We called up, it was actually Cuvée Saison at the time, and we said, okay, are you going to harvest on Thursday? Yeah, but you can have the lugs on Friday. Okay, well, we'll take them. And this went on all the time. We would not be where we are today without the help of numerous people that were here in the valley in the 70s. It was very different than I think because it was small, and we all have a closeness that I still feel with the people that are still here with us. And I think Napa today is fabulous. I love what's happening, but it was fun at the time trying to find a restaurant. I mean, there was just, that's why people were learning to cook at home with fabulous dinners, because the only place you could get good food is going to San Francisco. I mean, that's where the good food was, and here we were lucky. We had Triple S.
Absolutely.
That's right. With the best fried chicken in the world.
And now we have Ad Hoc for the best fried chicken in the world.
There you go. There you go. So I just had to mention, I know we lived in San Francisco before we moved up here, and I thought, oh boy, coming up to Calistoga, Napa Valley, I can always find a parking space. That was then, not now.
I can attest to this, and I'm sure that Jim can and all of us, but there is a culture here, and it really goes back, my understanding, it goes back to the early days. It was during the war, just after, when there was just a few people involved, and they shared everything, they had lunch together, and there was a great tradition of helping each other. And in my case, our first vintage, we had it, I took it to Markham, they were crushed. We went over to Round Hill, Ernie Van Asperen, and I fermented it there. I borrowed Joe Phelps' flatbed trucks, brought the barrels back, so there was this cooperation. In about our fourth vintage, I got a call from Silverado Vineyards across the street. They had bought a big new press from Switzerland. They couldn't make it work. There was something about the electrical, and yet they had all these grapes, and we said, well, bring them over here, which they did, and we pressed all their grapes. And that is a tradition that has gone on. Even today, marketing. We pour each other's wine, so there's a lot of people are amazed in other industries that we share that way and help each other.
What was wrong with that Swiss press?
We've all had these kinds of stories. We've helped each other.
I think I'd like to add a different dimension or color to the canvas of wine. And I'm absolutely convinced we wouldn't be sitting here as we are today with the reputation of the Napa Valley, but for a seminal event that happened in 1976. A young man wrote a book called The Judgment of Paris, and I think you're all fairly familiar about that. And I'm not going to talk about the event other than to say it was a seminal event, and I think we'd still be, at best, considered it an American Beaujolais, but for the fact that at the time when that Paris tasting occurred, remember that the French king, absolute king, nobody ever compared our wines, and we were trying to sell our wines on the West Coast. And we're bringing these wines, we're doing blind tastings against the French wines long before the Paris tasting, and a lot of other wineries are doing exactly the same thing down south, everywhere. Bob Mondavi was tremendous as a leader of that, and saying these wines are really every bit as good, if not better, than the French. I mean, this was our mantra. You have everybody say, "Oh, they're from California. Oh, that's nice." You know, I mean, these are guys who have been drinking for 30 or 40 years. Have been drinking these extremely good wines. I'm not knocking the French because they're fantastic wines. I think the first, second, and third gross for sure, year after year, and they do it with adverse weather conditions. It's incredible that they produce all of those good wines. But we are blessed with this fantastic place with the soils and the so-called terroir, the microclimate, all of that, and also the hand of man picking out these special places, such as what these people have and we have here, is putting the right grape in the right place and all of that. If the Paris tasting had not happened, we'd be a good Beaujolais, a California Beaujolais, as far as the wine world was concerned. What happened was there came the revolution. The revolution was the Paris tasting, and it changed winemaking all over the world, not just in California. And we were privileged enough, Chateau Montelena in the white wine, and even better Warren Winarski in Stag's Leap. It was an explosion. It just rocked the wine world. And guess who really was affected by it? Winemakers, yes, but wine drinkers all over the world. The bar got raised up. You know, it might have been down here. Now it's up to that ceiling. It's just incredible the quality of all wines that have been improved because of the competition and the fact that we have the sharing of information. If we develop something is in the making of wine, and we've got people who are working here in the winery. They're coming from South Africa, Germany, Australia. I mean, that's all of this integration that's occurring. And if it happens here, 2 days later, at the maximum, it's in South Africa. The information pool now through the internet is just absolutely, and the people movement is just absolutely incredible. It's just to have been part of that, and we were an important part of it. The Napa Valley changed, not just us. We were nothing but representatives, Stag's Leap and Chateau Montelena. We were representatives, but we'd still be trying to push doorbells, but for the Paris tasting, because now the people who are drinking wine all over, wine critics all over the world first, they said, hey, these are pretty good. That blind tasting thing, and it was not just a blind tasting in Paris, but because it was those French judges that said these wines are, well, you know the story. If you haven't, go read about it in The Judgment of Paris, because it's a hell of a story. and everybody has a story. You and I, each of us have our own personal story, but this is the wine story, not just of the century, but for the millennia. I mean, it's just incredible. Napa Valley was the one who caused it to happen, and not just us that were in that thing, but our predecessors, the people. I call it, you know, first there was the people that found the Napa Valley and started growing grapes here in 1880s, 1890s, turn of the century. People were making wine here. The second group of pioneers were in the 50s, Hans Coronel, and oh gosh, all kinds of people. There were about 7 or 8 of them well known at that time. And then the third one was something which I've got right here, and ta-da! And this is the class of 1972. And let me hold that for a second, will you, buddy? I just want you to read these names because these I got them. Got my goggles. Dr. Dino Dell. $14.96. These are all signed, and it says Stag's Leap Wine Cellar, Warren Winarski, Justin Meyer, Silver Oak, Diamond Mountain, L. Brounstein, Carneros Creek, Dennis Murphy, Burgess, Tom Burgess, Cabernet Sauvignon. And let's see, there's one other one here that says, oh, here it is, Chateau Montelena. And then there's one down here, we had to put him on because he was there. How in the hell he snuck in, I don't know. It was David Starrett at a Fumé Blanc from Dry Creek Vineyard. So this is kind of how it started. I mean, these were people that we work with. We call them the Band of Brothers, class of 1972.
John,
25 years.
Both you and Jim have sons that have followed in your footsteps. What is the best advice you have given them, or maybe I should say, what advice are they giving you now?
Well, I work for them now, you know. You know, I wanted a gray color on that press release, and it turned out white. A lot of things, you know, it isn't like it used to be. We 5 years after I started, Doug came on board, so we worked together 27 years out of our 32, and it's been a wonderful experience. I never would have worked with my father. Maybe I learned something, but we've had a great relationship, and it's interesting because we're in sync. Because one day I went in and I said, Doug, there's a couple of things I'd like to talk to you about. And he said, wait a minute. And he got a piece of paper and he wrote it down, put it down. Then he turned the paper over and he identified the 2 things I want to talk about. Now, that sounds spooky. But it happened, and then one other time it happened again. So we've had a wonderful relationship, and it's worked for us.
That's great. And Jim?
Well, anybody who saw Bottle Shock, and I had shooting rights approval over the final script. And when it had the boxing ring in it, I'm reading that part, and you know, here's the Oedipus Rex, you know, thing. And but I see where I knock him on his butt instead of vice versa, and I said, okay, I like that one. So anyway, I never laid a glove on him at all. Even when he was a little kid, he's always been a perfect little kid, which I can't say for all the rest of them. They got whacked on the butt many times. But we grew up together, learned together. I think he used to pick star thistles and rocks out of the vineyard when he was 16 years old, or 17 years old, so he could sneak out and buy beer on the QT and that kind of thing. But he learned that's where he started. Well, we've had 3 winemakers here. There was Mike Gergich, who was an excellent winemaker, and he was here for 4 years. There's Jerry Luper, who I call Super Luper. He said he didn't like it, but he loved it a lot, as a matter of fact, and he called Super Luper. And he actually had 2 wines in the Paris tasting let's see, in any event, he was here for 6 years. Bo started making wine here as the winemaker in 1982. Well, when Gergich left, Bo had been working here as a rebel. You know, I was in the Navy for a long time, and we used to have the seamen on the old sailing ships. There was always a mutinous group of people possible. So he was always part of the mutiny. Any problems that were going on in the winery, I'm talking about drinking beer and things on the job, he was part of it. So I wasn't a happy camper when it came to that kind of stuff. So anyhow, but he was assistant winemaker for 1 year but he'd been working here as just a vineyard worker in the winery for about 6 years. But all of a sudden, he's a guy who really thinks he knows a lot about it. So he asked to come in and talk to me, the boss, i.e., I'm sitting in my office, and he comes in and says, "Well, Dad, I'm ready." And I said, "Ready for what?" He says, "Ready to be the winemaker." He's been the assistant. Now Gergich took a hike because of 2 bags of gold or whatever it was, but in any event. Well, it happens to be the truth. So anyhow, he says, "I'm ready to be the winemaker." I said, "Hey, great, where are you going to be winemaker?" He said, "Here." I said, "I don't think so. I'm not into nepotism." So, because Jerry, he'd just come back. Well, here I am without a winemaker, but Jerry Luper had been working for a couple of years because he wanted to go and he learned in France for a couple of years. He came back and talk about being lucky. Gergich leaves, and 2 weeks later, Luper comes in and says, "Hey, Mr. Barrett, I just got back and I looked at his credentials and I had tasted those wines that he'd been making. I said, 'You got yourself a job.'" And we were just like that. Super Luper, myself, and my wife Judy, and Jerry's his wife. We were very, very close. And this goes on for almost 6 years. Was it 5 years? Something like that. 6 years, almost 6 years, 5.5 years. And Jerry says, he says, "Jim, we got to talk." So he comes in, and somebody's offering him 4 bags of gold. So he says, I said, "I can't match that, Jerry." I said, and we're buddies. You got to take that job. So I said, "Well, who should I get?" He says, "You're seated, so I can't tell you to be seated. You should hire your son." I said, "What?" And he says, "Yeah, he's highly qualified," and he goes through this whole litany. And so I call my son, who when I said he couldn't be winemaker, he left and he went down to work for what the hell was his name? The guy that was developing all the vineyards down by San Jose and Paso Robles. But somebody with a whole bag of money from Los Angeles is going to. So he was designing a whole winery with about 1,000 acres or something like that. And I thought, geez, I don't know whether he's going to be interested in this job. And so I called him up. I said, "Hey, Bo, how would you like to be a winemaker at a very famous winery and not work at it? Maybe or may not. I'd like to offer you the job to be winemaker at Chateau Montelena." He says, "I'll think about it." And he hung up. He left me twisting in the breeze for 3 days. So, yeah, we've had
like father, like son, I get you.
We've hunted and fished and skied together and done all kinds of stuff and flew together. So we're very close, and it's just been a wonderful relationship.